Sunshine! In 1988, a Chinese sniper Xiang Xiaoping fires 31 shots from his Chinese Type 85 sniper rifle at attacking Vietnamese soldiers. He kills 30 of them. 31st one was a hit too, but he crawled back to the Vietnamese front line. Later on, Xiang Xiaoping said that missing that 31st Vietnamese soldier was his biggest regret of his life. Welcome to the special episode about the Chinese Dragon. Before we'll dive in to the dramatic history creation of a Type 7985 a Chinese Dragunov rifle, we have to jump back to the war in Korea. What? Let me explain. So, during the 50s, China was really in tight relationship with the Soviet Union. So when Joseph Stalin called in Mao Zedong and asked for the assistance in Korea, China was really not in a position to say no. They needed Soviets' help with their economy, with the development of military armament, loans and things like this. China really didn't have big appetite for a war in Korea. Yes, they were concerned with the security of the Chinese-Korean border if the American forces would be there, but all events which led to the Chinese intervention in Korea were really not in the favor of the war at that time. Make no mistake, China didn't want to have US forces based on their border. That's the subject for a totally different discussion. But what happened was when the Soviet Union requested that Chinese involvement in North Korea, China basically had to say yes. And counter to that was that the Stalin promised to Beijing sell of the arms at the half of the manufacturing price for the Soviets. So that was a very good deal right there. And also Soviets promised to Chinese the air cover for their troops in Korea. That, of course, came with the little asterisks, and it didn't happen to the scale or at the time when the Chinese were really hoping for it. But that's what was happening in the Korean intervention. So China got involved mostly per pressure from the Soviet Union, and then, of course, because of their own domestic policy on the issues involving the Korea. But it was with the big pressure from Soviets. And Chinese troops were fighting a proxy war for the Soviets. Now, I did say that the China was hoping for the huge military assistance from the Soviets, from the Stalin. That, of course, didn't happen to the degree China was hoping for. So that was the turning point when the Chinese really had kind of bad taste in their mouth and were disappointed with the Soviet Union, quote-unquote, assistance. This was the first time when the China started maybe realizing that they have to rely a little bit more on themselves, and the Soviet Union isn't a very reliable partner. Now, that was the one of the reasons why the Chinese-Soviet relationship started falling apart. After the death of Stalin, Nikita Khrushchev took over, and Nikita Khrushchev immediately started dropping the Stalin under the bus and blaming Stalin for every problem which existed in the Soviet Union. That didn't settle well with the Chinese. Despite the issues for the Korean War, the Mao Zedong and also the Chinese still held the Stalin to the very high level of respect. Basically, the Joseph Stalin critic was not allowed in China. So here you got the Nikita Khrushchev, that little bastard, blaming Stalin and throwing the Stalin under the bus on every issue possible, and that didn't jelly with the China very well. It went to the point when the Chinese accused Nikita Khrushchev of not being a communist enough in their eyes, and led to a really drop in the relationship between those two countries. So at the same time, we're talking about the late 50s, as you guys know, Yevgeny Dragunov started work to develop the SVD rifle. And from previous episodes about the Zastava M91 or PSL 54, you know that at the beginning, Soviets were really not sharing that SVD rifle with anyone else. We'll go back to the specific events and the history of the development Russian SVD in a separate episode. This is something phenomenal, and I'm going to cover this. But through the beginning of the 60s, when the SVD 63, I think if my memory serves well, the SVD was being fielded in to the armed forces. Not everyone was getting that rifle, even through the beginning of 70s. It was very selective, sweepstakes for the specific countries which could participate in those sweepstakes and enjoy those rifles. So, of course, because of the bad relationship between the China and the Soviet Union, the Chinese never had a shot at the SVD. So we are in the 60s, and in the 60s, the relationships between the China and the Soviet Union started falling apart even more and more and more. Border clashes were present. The people were dying on the both sides of the aisle. It was really nasty. Funny enough, Nikita Khrushchev gets muscle out from the position of being a top leader in the Soviet Union. Leonid Brezhnev takes over. And it was a hope at that time that the Brezhnev will bring some normalization of the relationship between the China and the Soviet Union. Brezhnev efforts were basically shut down, and there was no hope to salvage that relationship back. Now, that takes me to the basically end of the 70s. And in the end of 70s, the China was pushed to the corner by Soviets. Soviets were working their way around the China and establish the pact and the basically military relationship with Vietnam. This is after the Vietnam War. So China wanted to teach the lesson of Vietnam and show them that the Soviets relationship really doesn't mean much. In 1979, February, the Chinese soldiers went into the northern Vietnam. One of the pretexts was, of course, the atrocities against the Chinese minorities committed by the Vietnamese. But one of the main goals, make no mistake, for China was to teach the Vietnam lesson that they cannot rely on the Soviets. Why is that important? Because during that short war in 1979, Chinese soldiers captured Russian SVD. And that Russian SVD was used for a development of the Chinese Type 7985. So you understand now what really happened and what led to the situation, and how we end up with the Chinese working on their own basically a copy of SVD. Once the rifle was captured, and they got a few examples, but once those were captured and moved to Beijing, immediately the work started, and the Chinese took it apart, put everything, the scope and the rifle, and they started working and creating the copy. They did absolutely perfect clone of the SVD, with the exception of the barrel twist. The Chinese settled at 315 millimeters. So that was the only difference at that time between the Type 79 and the Russian SVD. Now, at the beginning, the Type 79 supposedly had some metallurgy issues. They were having issues with the firing pins and things like this, but it's hard to confirm it from the Chinese side. Either way, in 1985, the changes were made, or the early production mistakes were corrected, and the Type 85 was created. There is really no way to tell between Type 79 and Type 85 the difference of what's happening inside. So I'm tending to agree that the issues were related to the manufacturing process, and those were caught and removed and corrected. What you're seeing here is basically Type 85. This was also the export example sold to United States by Norinco. Now, there is a small difference between the export version of the rifle and the military version, which is still in use in the Chinese military. This was done because of the ATF export license requirements. They had to correct the fire control group, so it is slightly different. You can see on the pictures the difference between these two, between real SVD and the Chinese copy NDM-86. That was the code name for the commercial sale in the United States. But from my understanding, from what I have seen, the Chinese Type 85 military version has exactly the same fire control group as the Russian Dragunov. Now, Chinese experienced some issues with the accuracy of the rifle, and they couldn't figure it out. They didn't know what happened when the Type 79 was created. The accuracy was not there. They performed multiple tests, and they couldn't compute what was happening. They had the originals, and the originals were shooting equally poorly. It turns out that when the rifles were captured, the Chinese really did not secure the correct ammunition for it. They assumed that those rifles, the Dragunovs, were running on a standard 7.62 by 54R ammo, which was mainly used for the machine guns. As we know, the Soviets developed for the Dragunov a 7-1 round, which was specifically designed to increase the accuracy of the rifle. Once that was figured out, the Chinese felt a little bit better about themselves. They knew they didn't screw up. I will tell you that this Type 85 shoots the lights out. It is absolutely very accurate rifle. I can extend the legs on it only to 700 yards here, but I had no problems hammering the hip-size target, and you can see from the footage that you really can produce a nice results with it. And it doesn't take much. The optic is working really good, the quality of the glass is really good, and the rifle shoots very, very well. Now, the Chinese never produced the copy of the 7-1 ammo, from my understanding. Again, if I'm mistaken, please post the comments underneath and I'll be happy to learn about it. But I couldn't find any documents suggesting that they ever produced the 7-1 or other versions of the sniper ammunition for the Type 79 and Type 85 rifles. So they learned basically to deal with it, with the shortcomings, by using the regular standard rounds. Still, rifle was extremely effective. I told you about the Chinese soldier who smoked 30 Vietnamese soldiers during that one event, and with 31 shots fired. So he got that one, the 31st Vietnamese soldier too. He was just wounded and he managed to crawl back. I think the record by the Chinese sniper is held, and it was over the 50 kills during the one of the many clashes with the Vietnamese, because the original Sino Vietnamese war ended after like 3 months in '79, but unofficial clashes were going through the whole decade. So before the both countries normalized their relationships in like 1991. So
One shot,
very
one kill.
interesting developments regarding the Chinese SVD. And basically, if you go through the documents on the Chinese side and trying to dig into the history of creation of Type 79, they don't hide it. They say that because Soviet Union did not have any agreements about the intellectual property with China, they basically ripped off completely the design and created their own copy of the SVD rifle. Rifle is extremely pleasant to shoot. There is no noticeable recoil. However, the 7.62 by 54R does produce a lot of side pressure, and even with this iconic flash hider, you can see that it sends out the shockwaves to the left and to the right, disturbing basically a vegetation. So when the snipers are using that rifle and they want to conceal their position, they have to be aware of it. Also, this muzzle device produces that iconic ping noise, which is no surprise again. From that type of the design for the flash hider, you're always going to have it. However, with all the bang coming out from the muzzle, that is the least to worry about it. But I know some people are complaining sometimes about those noises. It is normal, guys. On those flash hiders, it is very normal to have that high pitch noise. Stock is very comfortable, beautiful, with a cheek riser, which is included on the Chinese SVD. For me, as always, I'm struggling with those cone block stocks. I like to run some sort of extension to add a little bit more length of pull. Unfortunately, these stocks are not customizable. You cannot adjust the length of pull. It is what it is. So if you are a guy with the long arms, you may have to work on some sort of the solution at the end of the stock. But the cheek riser is included and it is working awesome. It really helps and provides the nice cheek weld to the stock, which, as you know from the cone block type rifles, is not very common option on those rifles. Overall, I think NDM86 delivers. It is outstanding rifle with a very good accuracy. I know there is a lot of talk and the people like to fight on the internet and complain about the accuracy of SVD, or saying that they are disappointed with the kind of accuracy they're getting. Guys, one more time, and I cannot stress this out, you have to use correct ammunition for this rifle to have results you are expecting from that type of the rifle. If you're going to feed it with the junk ammo, guess what? You're going to have a garbage results out at the end. And this is true to everything. I don't care what kind of rifle you have. If you're not feeding it with the ammo it deserves, usually you're not going to have a good results. those rifles were and are used all over the world to this day, and they are performing and they are delivering the hits when the hits are needed. You don't want to be on the receiving end of this rifle, let me tell you that much. I did manage to, of course, shoot and use the real SVDs, and I'll tell you this Type 85, which I have here, it shoots tighter than any SVD I had the pleasure to use. So my top of the head goes really to Chinese. They did a good job on it, but it is not really a Soviet SVD, right? So if you're looking for the clone of SVD, I think that you should start looking for those NDMs. They are still at, well, I want to say affordable price, but they are much cheaper than the SVDs. So keep your eyes open. All right, thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed this a little bit of the history and this episode. As always, thank you for watching those videos. Thank you for being with us. And big thanks for supporting us on the Patreon too, guys. Thank you.